Today's session, we will go over about appealing for financial or requesting a review of your financial aid. So we'll do a quick introduction on what that is, what that process looks like, if you are eligible to submit an appeal, as well as answering some commonly asked questions. So hopefully we'll equip you with the information that you need to do just that. And so we have a few items today before we get started. There is a Q&A, so this is a webinar style, meaning that you can see me, but I cannot see you. So if you have any questions throughout today's presentation, go ahead and drop them into the questions and answer or Q&A feature, and I will try and answer them throughout the presentation as well as towards the end of the presentation. I know we set aside for 1 hour today, but I don't believe it will take that long. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in. In addition, if you have questions, we do ask that it be general questions. However, if you have specific questions pertaining specifically to your family's circumstances, please do contact the Office of Financial Aid, and I will provide that information at the end of this presentation. Today's webinar will be recorded and it will be available on the admissions events recording page as well as on the financial appeals website. So if you want to go back after today to review the recording, what we talked about today, I believe I will on the financial website is where we'll make the slides available as well. But if you want a copy of it to be emailed to you, feel free to reach out to financial. We're happy to send you a copy. Here's the QR code with the webinar recording on the admissions website. So if you want to take out your phone, pull up your camera, go ahead and scan the code or take a picture of the slide so that you can refer back to it with the link on how to access that recording. Again, it will be on the financial website as well. Okay, so before we start talking about appeals, here's some basic or general information about on the appeal process. So USF does not compete or match financial offers received at another institution. So every financial offer besides, federal aid is specifically to each institution. And so a lot of times any scholarships or merit aid you may receive at another school doesn't correlate or transfer over to any other colleges. And with the exception of federal aid, like your federal grants, federal loans, those typically do stay the same, whether whichever school you decide to attend to. In addition, for USF, if you have a calculated student aid index or SAI, and this is calculated from your information that is provided on the FAFSA, if your SAI is between 0 to negative 1,500 or less than 0, you are not eligible to complete an appeal. And the reason is because if you are a 0 or negative 1,500 SAI student, you are currently being offered the maximum amount in federal, state, and institutional financial aid. So meaning that even if you submit an appeal, it wouldn't get you additional aid eligibility. But if you still have questions, even though you're not eligible to file an appeal, you can still contact the financial and we can review what other financial options are available to you and your family, as well as seeing if there's any other aid options elsewhere. So that's something that we can talk about even if you are not eligible to file an appeal today. In addition, merit aid, so those are your scholarships that's awarded on your admissions offer letter. That cannot be appealed. It is offered by the undergraduate admissions based on your application and your high school coursework. So let's say you have a better GPA. Unfortunately, you cannot appeal that. That's based on the determination on your application and when you were admitted. You must also receive a financial offer letter to file a special circumstance appeal. The reason is we want to see currently what you are eligible for first before we do the appeal to see what additional amounts we can get you. So if you filed a FAFSA, or a California Dream Act application, if you've been admitted, you should get a financial offer letter. And if you have not, then do please contact financially so that we can check the status as to why we cannot get you an aid offer yet. Any outstanding requirements. So if your file select for verification, for example, which means that you have to submit documents for us to verify the accuracy of your FAFSA data, that must be completed first prior to submitting an appeal because that may change your financial eligibility, especially if we have to make corrections or changes to your FAFSA income information or asset information, etc. We want to make sure that we have accurate data to work off of before we make any corrections or updates to your FAFSA for these what we call special circumstances. Now, what is a special circumstance appeal? So financial is authorized to make changes to your 26-2027 FAFSA if it is determined that you have a unique circumstance that affects your family's ability to pay. So usually like your income change, income loss, things like that. And that the FAFSA is no longer accurate reflection of your current financial circumstances. So if those statements are true, typically these are situations where we can make um, these what we call corrections or updates to your FAFSA to bring in more current information or current financial information to your FAFSA. And hopefully by doing that, will get you additional aid eligibility. Now, what are some of these circumstances? For example, unusual or uncovered medical expenses. And what we are referring to are, medical expenses that your parents or you in your family pay for out of pocket, right? That are not covered by third party, other sources, health insurance. In addition, we cannot appeal if it's billed but unpaid, right? So part of that appeal, we will ask for supporting documentation. In this case, like a statement or receipt that you've paid these medical expenses, as well as how much expenses were paid in the past year. So again, if it's paid by health insurance or if it's billed but unpaid, we unfortunately cannot consider those medical expenses. The death of a parent, contributor, or spouse after the FAFSA was filed is another one. Loss of employment or income, as I mentioned a moment ago. Dependent care, divorce or separations, again, after the FAFSA was filed. Secondary school tuition. So if you have certain K to 12 expenses, now not all considered, and this is only for special cases where we may be able to consider private K to 12 education expenses. But again, it's very limited. Or student cannot obtain parental information. And lastly, tuition paid for sibling that is in college. So again, we're looking in this case at tuition paid for the upcoming 2026-27 school year. And we do not include housing. So another one would be housing. And so that now this list is not inclusive of everything. This is just an example of what some of these special circumstances are. But if you think about, you know, because the FAFSA collects information from 2024, right? That's your 2024 income, tax information. And that things can change, right? In 2025 and 2026. If your family's income, and we're looking at income, not really not really about expenses, but like let's say your income that has changed to a point where 2024 is no longer accurate representation, that's probably a good idea to talk to financially so that we can review your situation to see if this is something that we could do an appeal for. But there are things we can't do it for, right? Let's say you won the lottery and that in 2024, and now you don't have that money anymore. We cannot consider those lottery winning as a special circumstance appeal. Same as like if you have credit card debt, things like that. Those aren't what we consider. Now, what is some of the? I do have a question here that asks about what some of the special cases are for secondary school tuition. Typically, the ones we've encountered are where due to a student or a child's disability, right? Or like learning disability, they need to have private uh, education to be able to accommodate that. That's something that we may be able to consider, right? Um, but if it's simply that, um, let's say, family's choice to put a student in private education and pay tuition that way, then those typically we would not consider. So for dependent students, and this is just an example of what those circumstances are. Dependent students are students who have parent information on the FAFSA. So they're required to provide their parents' information because maybe they're under the age of 24, they're not married, etc. Um, uh, this change or circumstance would impact a parent. Um, so we're looking at a prolong, and what prolong means in our definition is 3+ month of change, right? So prolonged loss of income due to unemployment of your parents, prolonged reduction of income due to a pay cut or reduction of work hours, death of a parent contributor, out-of-pocket educational expenses for dependent. So this would be your sibling in college. Um, and that would be some example pertaining to a dependent student. For an independent student, these are students whose parents are information is not being collected on the FAFSA, maybe because they are married, they're supporting children, um, you're over the age of 24, etc., then we're only looking at you, the student, as well as your spouse. If you are married, we're only looking at your information. So in that case, prolonged loss of income of you or your spouse, prolonged reduction of income, such as a pay cut or reduced workload, or death of your spouse. So typically, those are situations that pertains more on the independent student side. And again, when we're doing appeals, we're looking at prolong, right? So if it's something that's happening or happened within the last month, unfortunately, when you contact us, we will ask you to hold and contact us back once that 3 months has come by before requesting that appeal. And the reason is because sometimes with these income loss, they may be just temporary. Parents are looking for jobs. And so maybe they're back at work again within the 3 months, and their earnings or income is now expected to be similar or hopefully more than what they earn in 2024. So we do allow some time for that just in case, situation changes again, where your family's income is now similar to 2024. Now, here's how to file an appeal. So here's the QR code at the bottom right corner. Again, if you use your phone's camera, it will take you to our website. And on the website, it will detail what an appeal encompasses, what these documentations are, the instructions on how to submit it. But here's how you can request it, right? So the first step, the very first step that you need to do is to set up a time to talk to us. We don't do, and I forgot to take this part off actually. Apologies on my end, but we no longer do Zoom drop-ins. So you will have to set up a time to talk to us. Either by calling us or emailing us or visiting us in person. And basically, that is just for us in financial aid to understand a little bit more about your situation and also to let you know, is this a situation that we can do an appeal on, or if we cannot do an appeal on that. In addition, it is a time for us to let you know what some of these supporting documentations are that we need to collect for your appeal. After that, so again, I guess I also hit on that is that we will determine, review your situation with you. We may ask you for information, for example, what changed, when did it change, and what the reduction or change looks like, right? We may ask you for 24, 25 tax information, and hopefully you would have filed, hopefully you will or will be filing soon your 2025 taxes, because in some situations we may actually need the 25 taxes to be able to do the appeal for you. After that, we will open the appeal for you and open the portal for you to submit the appeal online to us. So you don't have to email us anything. It is through a secure portal where you can complete the appeal form, write your supporting statement, and upload your supporting documentations. And that's all done online. We will email the instructions to you on how to access that. But the very first thing you must do for the student is to have a MyUSF account, because it is linked to that. And if you have not created one yet, it is part of your next step, but there are specific instructions for new students to set up their MyUSF for the very first time. And I highly recommend doing so also because a lot of the financial communication, our official communication method is via email, specifically the student's USF email account, in which case they do need their MyUSF to gain access to. After that, we will review the appeal. We will three things can happen once we get to your appeal. One is we can ask for additional information. So while reading your statement, so again, we did an initial review, which we hopefully, gather most of your documents. But when we sit down and we actually review the appeal, there may be additional information that we might need in order to make that final determination on your appeal. So that's one. Secondly, your appeal can either then be approved or denied. If it's approved, we'll go ahead and make the changes to your FAFSA. We'll go ahead and review your additional aid eligibility once the updated FAFSA comes back. And if it's denied, then you're welcome to contact us. We can sit down and actually talk about what other funding or financial options may look like. As mentioned, emails will be sent to the student's USF DONS email account. That is the official communication method for financial aid. If you're a new student and you don't check your USF email account or you don't anticipate checking it regularly, you can actually set up the emails to forward to your personal email. So once you have access, go into your USF email account, set up email forwarding. So then that way you still get timely communication from financial, especially with incomplete appeals, meaning we need more information. That way you can resubmit it as soon as possible to prevent delay. And hopefully, we'll be able to get you a final decision before you make your decision on May 1st or June 1st if you're a transfer student. Okay, with that out of the way, we'll go over some of the commonly asked questions regarding the appeal process, as well as to give you an example of what these supporting documentations look like. And again, you could drop, if you have any questions through any time throughout, just feel free to drop them into the question and answer, and I'll try to answer them now, or I will wait to the very end to get to them. So first, do I have to complete the FAFSA in order to submit an appeal? The answer is yes. So either a FAFSA or a California Dream Act filer, if you are a California resident and you meet AB 540 requirements, you do have to have a completed FAFSA for us to do an appeal, because without a FAFSA, we unfortunately can only consider you for merit aid. And going back to the very beginning is that merit aid, unfortunately, is not appealable, right? Because we need the FAFSA to be able to determine your need-based aid eligibility. If you are selected for verification, and again, this just means that your file was selected by the Department of Education for the school to to ensure that your FAFSA data is accurate. This usually requires us to collect your maybe tax return in 2024, W-2s, things like that. So these must be completed before we can do an appeal. So again, going back to the beginning of the presentation, was that we need to ensure that the data is accurate first before we do any circumstance changes to that. How do I submit my appeal and all supporting documentations? So if it is determined that you do qualify for an appeal, that you are eligible to submit one, then financial aid staff will provide you with the instructions. Typically, we'll email that to you. Or if you visit us in person, we might hand you a piece of paper with the instructions. so that you can upload your documentations. You can track your appeal. You can get notified, whenever a decision comes out for the appeal. So that's all done online. How long will it take? This is the piece that I would recommend that you submit as early as possible, especially if financial aid is a big factor in whether you make that decision to commit to the University of San Francisco or not, because it does take time to review. And it depends on how many reviews that we have ahead of your appeal. We do go by date order. And typically it can take anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks or more. We do aim to complete within 2 to 3 weeks, but sometimes depending on the volume, no matter how much we try, we may not be able to. But we do make every attempt to do so. And then, as mentioned, appeals will be reviewed in the order that they are received. So the most important part is that you want to make sure that the first go around, you submit all the documentations that we had asked for. Because any incomplete appeal or appeals that we request additional information for will delay your appeal decision. So it's always important, first go around, submit everything. Even if you don't think we may need it, but you believe that it is helpful for us to make that determination, just go ahead and upload that, right? It's better to have a little bit more than not enough, right? For the appeal, just to prevent any kind of further delay to this process. If my appeal is incomplete, can I resubmit it? So yes, you can resubmit additional information because we only review completed appeals. But do keep in mind that if it is incomplete or that it will it will delay the decision, right? Especially if we're getting close to that, end of April, heading on to May 1st. And if you need that decision before that, that's where that comes into play, where doing so and doing so as quickly as possible is important. And then once it is provided, once you already provide the additional information, it will be reviewed according to the later date of receipt. So unfortunately, appeals in our queue is presented in date order. And then can I provide additional information once my appeal is submitted? So yes, you can, but similar point is that it will delay your decision, right? So that's why it's important for you to just submit everything, make sure we have everything prior to clicking on that submit button for the appeal. What type of documentation is needed to accompany an appeal? So later on, I'll go over some of the common situations, and they roughly take the same type of documents. Essentially, if you are unemployed, we might ask you for your unemployment benefit information, termination letters from your previous employer. If you have a job change or reduction in work hours, we may ask you for paycheck stubs. Typically, we ask for about 4 paycheck stubs. Statement from legal counsel, proof of benefits. If you're talking about, receiving, let's say, Social Security, for example, or disability payments, etc. We will ask for some of those documentations. Also, in addition to what's on here, something that we typically ask for as well would be your tax return, because that gives us a completed year, as well as for medical, we'll ask for like receipts or billing statements of amounts that are paid. And then I believe I have a future slide on sibling college. I think that's a common one as well. So I'll go over that part once we get to that slide. Can I appeal a denial decision? So if your appeal is not approved, meaning denied, a future appeal can be made depending on your circumstances. So once, let's say, we make a determination based on a situation and that situation changed again or is worse than what it initially was, then yes, you can request us to take another look. We'll open a second appeal. We will ask for additional supporting documentations pertaining to that new situation, and then we can do an appeal again. Um, and is there a limit on how many times I can appeal? You can appeal a total of 2 times, assuming that circumstances have changed. So if it has not changed, and let's say we denied the appeal, you cannot appeal a denied appeal, right? But you can ask us to take another look, if the situation has changed, or maybe that you did not submit information that is pertinent, and that you want to submit it now, then we may be able to do so. But you'll have to follow the same process, right? You have to contact financial, we'll talk to you, and then the decision again, same timeline, 2 to 3 weeks or more, depending on where we're at with appeals. So yeah, I will say, like, if you have everything situation wise, just put them all in the appeal at the same time. Now, who makes these appeal decisions? These appeals are reviewed by committees, so typically not just one staff member. They get reviewed by multiple staff members, including the director of financial aid. And so the appeal cannot be made with other departments on campus, for example, admissions office or your program of study, or to the Department of Education. So this is strictly a financial aid appeal with the financial aid office. And if my appeal is not approved for the current year, which is 26-27, can I appeal for next year, which is 27-28? So if your FAFSA information at that time for 2027-2028 is no longer accurate reflection of your family's financial circumstances, you certainly can request another appeal at that time when we release the financial aid offer for next school year, which typically for our continuing students, we release them sometime, probably like in April. And so once you get the aid offer, yes, you can request another appeal at that time for that particular school year. Am I being considered for federal, state, and institutional aid? So if your appeal is approved, we do look at eligibility for all, so including federal, state, and institutional need-based aid. So again, merit we don't review for, but everything else we can. And so um, some changes when we do the appeal does not increase your federal aid, but maybe it does increase your institutional aid, right? And again, with state aid, maybe you do get state aid, but not federal aid. So it really depends, how much has changed, how drastic of a change it was, and seeing, how much additional aid we can get you. Our goal in financial aid, we're trying to get you the most aid possible, right? Um, and so we're not trying to withhold anything. If you're eligible, we will review it. And then is the federal aid in the form of a loan or a grant? It can be both. So when we do this appeal, sometimes it does increase grants, for example, your Pell Grant, or maybe Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, or sometimes it's just additional a need-based loan, which in this case is a direct subsidized loan. Subsidized loan is a need-based aid, so we may convert, maybe as part of the appeal process, converting some of your unsubsidized loan into a subsidized loan, which is the loan that does not accrue interest while the student's in school. So it can be multiple, right? It can be both grants and loans. It could be grants only or loans only. So it really depends on your situation. If my situation has, I think this is a important one too. But if my situation hasn't changed yet, but I do anticipate it changing, can I appeal or should I wait? So in this case, you should wait because for for this particular appeal, we don't use events that will happen in the future, right? For example, we have parents that contact us because they've already got maybe like a layoff notice and they anticipate to be out of work in the next month. We unfortunately cannot do that, an appeal for that situation just yet. We do have to wait for that prolonged period, which is 3 months after it happened, before we can do the appeal. Same as medical expenses, right? You accrue medical and it's billed you haven't paid it yet, but you will pay it. Unfortunately, that also cannot be considered. And that will have to wait until the event occurs. If a decision isn't made before the end of the semesters, can my aid change? So yes, it can. So decision for appeals, you know, and any approval, any additional aid eligibility, is at the time the appeal is approved, right? That the appeal is approved. And sometimes that may be after the semester begins. Um, and so let's say you're already on a payment plan or you already paid the tuition, any additional aid can be issued as a refund. So let's say, you do get additional grants after the fact. We can't go ahead and your tuition is already paid for. We can't go ahead and issue a refund for the amount of the grant that you're eligible for. So we can do it anytime during the semester. It doesn't have to be today. Some families do want the decision prior to them making the decision to attend USF. So in that case, you should do it earlier rather than later. But if you've already committed and you're attending USF and um, any aid that you get, it's let's say a bonus, right? Then in that case, you can choose to wait to submit the appeal until later, right? You can submit in June, July, August, September, October, November, even, right? It just means that any financial aid that you get will not happen until that time, right? So what are some of these example documentations? Um, and this is again is not capture it doesn't capture all circumstances. Again, we'll review the situation with you to determine what those information might look like. But these are some of the things you might anticipate, right? So we definitely need for everybody, regardless of what your situation is, to have a signed statement explaining your circumstance. The information that is helpful for us includes what's changed, when did it occur, and do you anticipate it being back to what it was? Or is this change going to be permanent moving forward? And amounts, right? Any source of income, right? Maybe you have a new job or maybe you have multiple jobs. What we want to know is help us paint a picture of what your family's current financial situation or income situation looks like, right? Because we as the reviewer, although you spoke with financial aid, right? We as reviewers, um, could only have a picture of your family based on what you tell us, what you write to us. So that's why it's important to have dates and the events and what the future will look like. 2025 federal tax return would sometimes be helpful, especially if your change happened in 2025. Um, this will be helpful. So if you have not filed tax return and you do anticipate us needing it, maybe it might be a good idea to file that tax return now, so that we do have it when you submit or when you ask us to do an appeal, right? Versus if we do ask for it and we do need it, and then you file at that time, it may create some kind of delay for you, right? Earning statement or paycheck stubs. So if you have a job change, this is important. Maybe you're not receiving bonuses anymore due to the financial forecast of your company. Maybe you got a new job, but you're not working as much, or maybe you got reduction in work hours. This is the time where we will ask for paycheck stubs. Normally, we do ask for the last four paycheck stubs. That also includes the year-to-date earnings on it. Any severance documentations, if you were laid off and you received some kind of severance package, statement, year-to-date income, especially if you are self-employed or have your own business, any furloughed or termination letter. So basically, these are your employment verification, right? We want to see when you last worked for that company. Sometimes we may ask for bank statements, unemployment insurance. So if you're receiving unemployment, death certificates, separate, divorce decrees, proof of separation, IRA rollover. Hopefully on the FAFSA, you do not report IRA rollovers, but sometimes parents unfortunately do. And so in that case, we may ask for IRA rollover documentation. This is the common appeal that we do, is a sibling in college. So if you have a sibling, or if you're a parent and you have another child that's attending college in the upcoming school year 2026 to 2027, you may be able to file an appeal for us to account for the tuition that you're paying for this for your child. Um, and as I mentioned at the very beginning, is that we only look at tuition, right? Minus any grants and scholarships, things like that that the student may be receiving. Um, if the sibling is attending USF, all we need in this appeal is the sibling's full name, their student ID number, and we'll be able to pull up the rest of the information that we need for the appeal. Keep in mind they must be enrolled at least halftime. And for us at USF, halftime is anything more than 6 units or 6 credits. And we can only consider undergraduate enrollment. So if they're a graduate student or doctoral student, et cetera, we cannot consider those tuition expenses. Now, if the sibling is attending another college or university, then we'll require four things. One is a proof of enrollment for the upcoming school year. Uh, Maybe like the fall schedule, class schedule, something like that, or a enrollment verification from the registrar's office of that college. A copy of the financial 26-27 financial offer letter. I know this is typically a little bit early. Some schools may not be releasing financial offers for next school year, so sometimes you may have to wait a little bit um, to see. So just keep that in mind. A copy of the 26-27 cost of attendance for that school. Typically, you can find this on the student's financial portal or on that college's website. You could do a name of the college and then, or do a search for name of the college, cost of attendance. Typically, you'll be able to pull something out from there. And then lastly, a completed FAFSA submission summary. So if they've already completed FAFSA, you should be able to log into student8.gov to retrieve a copy of that FAFSA submission summary. And all we need is just a printout, right? So we just need to see, what the FAFSA data looks like and what the student's aid index looks like and determine their financial need. So those are the four things we need, as well as the appeal statement for a sibling college appeal. I do have a question that's kind of related to this. So they have a younger sibling that is going to a private school, and that makes up most of our expenses. Is that means to file an appeal? So I'm not sure if you're referring to a private school in terms of K to 12, or private school in the form of college. Because if it's college, yes, that is something that we can appeal for. And again, sometimes when you contact us for an appeal for sibling college, it really also matters on what your current family's current income looks like, because it is possible that your income's too high, where even if we account for the tuition paid for that sibling college, it may not change your financial eligibility. So that is a possibility. In addition, what we look for in these kind of appeals is that paying the students tuition, right, to attend USF causes a financial burden or financial hardship for your family, in addition to paying your other child's college expenses. Those are what we look for in appeal. So it's also important that when you do your statement, that you explain how this would cause financial hardship for your family. And then termination and layoffs. I think I briefly touched on this, but essentially we'll need a statement. We'll need 3 to 4 paycheck stubs. I do tend to ask for four so that we can see or get a better average of what your monthly or annual income will look like. A letter from the former employer that confirms your last day of work there or when you were terminated. um, Documentation showing the amount of unemployment you're eligible for, an estimate of your income earned for 2026. So if you have a new job, in terms of now in 2026, we do ask for those um, pay stubs so that we have an idea or we can estimate of what now it looks like for the year. And then if your parents reemployed, then that would be the paycheck stubs. And then self-employed is very similar. The only difference is that as a self-employed employee, a lot of it is running on your business. And so if you can provide, obviously you won't have paycheck stubs probably, but some kind of income profit loss statement. So how much you bring in, how much is, business loss you're accounting for, is something we look for. We may, for example, like in your statement, especially if your business is cyclical, like for example, a flower shop and you lose, and 30% of your business comes from Valentine's Day, right? And whereas the rest of the year, you're pretty slow in terms of that flower business, you also want to let us know, right? What, if that is the case, right? But most importantly, we do ask for supporting documentation in the form of some kind of document that can show us your profit loss thus far. And here's a contact information for financial aid. So if you have any questions after today, again, I'll go through the questions and answers that we have submitted thus far. Now's a good time to remind you that if you do have questions, please drop them into the question and answer, and I'm happy to answer them starting now. But if you have specific questions related to your specific situation, and they're a little bit more private, do contact us. These are the few methods that we have. You can scan that QR code. It'll take you to our contact page as well as providing you with our office hours. We're available by phone. We are on phones Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time. You can always email us anytime, but just know that with email, we do have a delay. Typically, response time is about 3 to 5 business days. Or if you're on campus, for example, you're here on a school tour, feel free to drop into our office. We're located in Low Mountain 203, right up these steps and into this main door. And we are here Monday through Friday from 9 to 4 Pacific time, except for 3 p.m. on Wednesdays. And again, just a reminder that our recording webinar is being recorded. So this is the link directly to the admissions events recording webpage, but it will be on our financial webpage under appeals as well. All right, with that in mind, I do appreciate everyone joining me today. I will go ahead and stop for the next 10 or so minutes to answer your questions and answers. But if you have any questions, do contact Financial. We're all happy to help you and assist you in getting the most aid possible. We do have subsequent webinars, so keep an eye out for those webinars, especially with our financial next steps, where we go over a little bit more about financial offers and the financial process. Yeah, so I'll spend the next 10 minutes, but otherwise, I hope if you're not staying, again, just I want to thank you for your time and yeah, hope you have a great rest of your evening. Okay, so we do have a question here about if we've never filed a FAFSA for the sibling that's now in the third year of college, can we still appeal for our student at USF? Um, the answer is yes. Um, you can still file an appeal. But for the sibling, you may want to submit a FAFSA. It is a free application. So if you're able to submit a FAFSA, I would say go ahead and submit a FAFSA so that we know, what the financial need is for the other student. But if you are not going to for whatever reason, just make sure you explain that in your appeal statement. How is tuition paid for another sibling in college evaluated? As I mentioned, we do look at tuition again, excluding housing, unfortunately. And tuition we account for would be, after grants and after scholarships. We typically don't include loans. So whatever that amount is, we also in financial have our own rubrics on how much we can deduct from your family's income as the amount that can be used for tuition. So, but yeah, that's just for us to deduct a certain part of your amount of your income for educational expenses. We have another question on how long it would take to receive the new aid package after the appeal submitted. So after the appeal is reviewed, right, within hopefully that 2 to 3 weeks timeline, we do have to make an update to your FAFSA. So that process itself can range anywhere from, I would suspect probably 2 to 3 business days. As soon as we get that FAFSA back, we will go right away to review your new aid eligibility. When we approve the appeal, we kind of have an idea, but we don't make changes to your FAFSA until we actually get the new FAFSA back. As soon as we review it same day. Once we have that reviewed, then we will email you with probably an email that kind of says like, what your old award are and what your new awards are. So just so you can compare and see what's changed. But we do that pretty quickly. You don't have to wait too long for your financial package to be updated. If my appeal is approved after the start of the semester, what will happen? Um, so we can still do the appeal. If you do get additional aid, and again, if you've paid your tuition already, we'll issue you a refund. If you still have an outstanding balance for the semester, we will just apply the additional aid towards your bill. And if you're on payment plan, we will apply towards your bill and adjust your payment plan accordingly. So we have a question here for looks like they received a financial letter, but there's no need-based aid. They only get merit aid. They submitted FAFSA and qualify. Could I appeal? So yes, you can appeal. So again, if your family experienced one of the circumstances that we have mentioned, and the family's income no longer reflects, because this is a time for us to review need-based aid eligibility, right? So let's say with the new income change, you are eligible for need-based aid. We will go ahead and offer you need-based aid, right? In addition to the merit aid. So, and I would suggest that even if you don't think it may make a change or you're only eligible for merit, still talk to us about appeal. Who knows? You may be able to get something as part of the appeal, right? But if you don't submit one or you don't talk to us, we don't know. How much aid is typically given for an appeal that's approved for a sibling in college? Unfortunately, this depends. It's going to depend on your overall financial situation, how much expenses we're talking about for tuition. So I do not have a specific dollar amount. It does unfortunately varies greatly per family. If my appeal is denied, what other ways to receive help financially? There are additional financial aid options that are available, and we're happy to discuss that with you when you contact us. Or you could check out our financial website or join one of our webinars, upcoming financial webinars that goes over financial next steps. We do go over a little bit more about what other financial options there are. For example, Parent Plus loan, private student loan, outside scholarship, payment plans, right? So those are some of the additional funding options. But talk to us or join one of our future webinars or check out that information on our financial website. So I think this is pertaining to one of the beginning slides. So what is extraordinary dependent care? Um, so what we're referring to when we're talking about dependent care is, usually if someone in the family has some sort of disability that requires additional care to be provided, those are what we were referring to for extraordinary dependent care. Um, but again, not inclusive. So there may be other situations that, you're paying for certain expenses as a result of something, right? What we don't consider, maybe something like childcare, for example. But yeah, something that has to do with like medically a medical need or due to disability, etc. Those are kind of what we're referring to. I think this is a good question. We do have a question. Does having another college student that we are helping financially typically help file an appeal? So I think what this question is referring to is if they are paying tuition for another person in college, if that could be considered. Unfortunately not. We could only consider appeals for dependents or siblings that are included as part of the family on the FAFSA. So if you're paying tuition for, let's say, a niece or nephew or some other, unfortunately we cannot consider those college expenses on your student's appeal process. So that's all the questions I have show up. I do have another minute or two. So if you have any last minute question, feel free to drop them into the Q&A right now. Um, as always, you can contact us in Financial Aid. We're happy to discuss your situation with you to see if we can get you additional aid or start the PO process. Again, we're available via phone, email, and in person. We will be available Monday through Friday in person. So if you're here for a tour or if you are here for a future event like Destination USF, we will be available there as well. Yeah, I think first step is just to talk to us. If you have any questions, not just appeal, but about your financial package, about financial aid options, exploring, everything, if there's a aid that you don't understand, just feel free to talk to us. We're all happy to help. We're happy to answer any questions you have as you are making those decisions.